Hello everyone, hope you're all well. Welcome to this introduction to Binalyze and a presentation on delivering cyber resilience with enterprise forensics. So before we begin, and while we're waiting for the last few people to join the presentation, just a few housekeeping points. There is a panel on the right-hand side for you to submit questions and comments. We will answer all the questions at the end of the webinar, but I'm sure they'll pop into your head as we go through the demonstration. So please write them down there and we'll deal with them at the end. We also have a Discord server for more technical discussion and technical support. There is an invite to that server in the chat, so please use that link and we'd love to see you over on Discord. And for existing users of Binalyze products, just a reminder that technical support is always available at binalyze.com/support or by email at support@binalyze.com. So for many of you, this will be your first interaction with Binalyze. So just a very quick introduction to the company itself. We were founded in 2018 and the company is based in Estonia. It's founded by and run by Emre Tinaztepe, who's joining me on the call today. He's a 15-year cyber veteran and former Komodo. We were fortunate enough to be seed funded in January of this year by Early Bird VC, which is one of the largest tech VCs in Europe. They also have 3 unicorns under their belt already. We're hoping to be the 4th. We are also fortunate to have a highly experienced advisory board, which includes veterans of law enforcement, including the NYPD cybercrime head, former head of in New York, and corporate CISOs from the likes of Microsoft and Standard Chartered. The secret sauce at Binalyze is 80% of the team have worked together for more than 10 years. This is our second startup together. As a result, we're highly aligned and we iterate at pace. So if you are familiar with us, you'll know that the product updates come thick and fast. New features and a full roadmap. And we were fortunate enough in the previous startup to work with Comcast and 10 million customers in the US. And the reason why I've included that is because it's really driven the philosophy that we have at Binalyze towards product development, which is to make it lightning fast and easy to use. And hopefully you'll see that in a few moments when we begin the demonstration. So I'm sure many of you have spotted the trend recently towards building cyber resilient strategies as part of the overall security posture. Binalyze is the platform to deliver on that strategy. We've been doing that for the last 3 years. This short video from Harvard Medical School, something of a eureka moment 3 years ago, and it does a really effective job of explaining Binalyze's product market fit. The video also has 2 million views, and I think Emre is responsible for most of them. Just speed it up so we can get through it quickly. So what we have here is, or what Harvard Medical School have here is a Petri dish with 9 barriers of varying antibiotic strength. So 0 on the outside, increasing to 1,000 in the middle. And when they place the bacteria in the 0 strength area, predictably it fills, but it can't get into the 1 strength. Until it does, some of the bacteria adjusts and evolves and starts to spread again. And the same thing happens at each barrier until bacteria is able to grow in the 1,000 strength antibacteria. This is a great metaphor for what the cyber industry has been doing for the last decades, focusing on increasing the number and strength of protective barriers. Despite that, breaches are continuing to happen and increasing in frequency. And so this is the drive towards cyber resilient strategies. What you see here on the screen at the moment is what Binalyze does. We quickly show the picture of the cyber crime scene, and you can understand what, when, and how the breach occurred to limit the exposure, time, and the risk. So, what's the tactical solution for delivering a cyber resilient strategy? Well, we believe it's enterprise forensics. But digital forensics has been around for a long time. So what's the difference between traditional forensics and enterprise forensics, and why do we believe this is a new category of digital forensics? Well, where it was previously slow, taking many hours, sometimes days, to take a disk image, we're trying to make it fast, and we'll show you that in the demonstration shortly. What was previously physical, needed to be at the scene, is becoming remote. What was reactive is becoming proactive. Siloed data that was stuck with individual analysts is becoming integrated with other business systems and shareable within teams. Taking terabytes of data is a noise-based methodology, whereas we prefer to focus on the signal, the relevant information. And of course, traditional forensics is available during working hours. Enterprise forensics is 24/7. So if you're familiar with Binalyze, you may well know the product IREC. This was our first product, which we developed 3 years ago. IREC has now matured and evolved into the engine of all of our products. So the current product matrix is tactical, which is our evidence collector. So with one click, in less than 10 minutes, we're collecting 120 different evidence types. And that product's available now as a soft license or as a hardware dongle. AIR is our enterprise forensic suite. So this is our flagship product where you can collect, collate, and collaborate in under 10 minutes. And we're going to demonstrate this for you today, acquiring evidence remotely, triaging and timelining, integrating and automating. And this is available now as well as an annual endpoint license. And launching today is Drone, our remote and on-demand compromise assessment product. We're calling it investigation as a service, and consider it like an AI senior analyst that's available 24/7 and can be triggered when the breach occurs. And we're going into beta launch of this product tomorrow, actually, but it will, within 45 days, be available as a standalone product and also as a module of AIR. So with that quick introduction, let's begin the demonstration. And we're going to show you 4 principal things today. The first is remote collection of 120 plus evidence types in under 10 minutes. Remotely performing triage at scale and generating collaborative timelines. Triggering tasks via integrations with other systems such as CM. And automatically analyzing evidence for fast compromise assessment. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Emre, who will take you through the demonstration.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, let's start. Today, we'll be demonstrating Binalyze Drone, which is the fastest way of making a compromise assessment. But since AIR is the best way of launching drones, we'll first go over the features of AIR. And the first feature we'll be covering today is the evidence acquisition. That's actually why AIR was developed in the first place. So using AIR, you can remotely collect evidence from a number of endpoints. And the list is comprehensive. You can collect over 120 different evidence types. And it's really fast. You can collect the evidence in just 10 minutes. All the evidence is time-stamped. So that way you have a proof that that specific evidence existed at that specific time. Another unique feature of AIR is ransomware shielded, because when you have a machine that is infected by ransomware, ransomware does not discriminate whether it's an evidence or a document file. So whatever is collected, whatever the machine has access to, is immediately encrypted. And thanks to the feature of Binalyze AIR and IREC, all the collected evidence is shielded against any modification against ransomware. And by default, we provide evidence compression. So all the evidence you collect will be compressed. And you can optionally enable encryption as well. And all the evidence will be encrypted by IES. In terms of where to save the evidence, we have a number of options. Starting from the early days, we have local repositories, so you can save the evidence onto the target machine, or you can save it into an SMB drive, network share, basically, that is protected by username and password. And in the recent versions, we have added support for SFTP. And in the upcoming version that will be released this month, you will also have cloud evidence repositories, such as Amazon S3 buckets or Azure Blob Storage. You can perform this acquisition on demand, so whenever you need to collect something from an endpoint or a group of endpoints, you can start an acquisition, or you can also schedule acquisitions on a weekly, like daily or monthly basis. So that way, especially for your critical assets, you'll be able to collect evidence regardless, like whether you have an alert from the endpoint or not. So you'll continuously have all the evidence, like relevant evidence collected. And another great thing about AIR is you can integrate AIR with your CM1 or SOAR products or any webhook source, basically, and you can trigger the acquisitions based on the alerts these products generate. So let's go to the AIR console and see how it works. I'll first start with the deployment, because we really want you to see how easy it is to deploy an endpoint agent. When talking about endpoint agents, by the way, our endpoint agents are passive. And that's the first thing you'll notice when you install. I mean, the resource usage is just 4 megabytes on the endpoint. And the reason they're called passive agents is they're not doing any scanning on the endpoint unless you ask them to do. So it's just like having someone always available, like 24/7 on the endpoint. And whenever you click the button or whenever your CM generates an alert, you can ask them to immediately start taking actions. Let me first deploy it to a Windows device. You can also deploy it to like Linux flavors. So you can either download the executable by clicking like the installer, clicking this button. It's it supports both 32-bit and 64-bit. And we also have an easier way of deploying it. If you visit this URL from an endpoint that has access to the address, let's visit it, and then download it. As you see, it's just a 10 megabytes size executable, and it's zero configuration. So the only thing you need to do is just click and run, and in just 30 seconds, the installation will complete. Now, going back to the endpoints page, now we have our lab PC registered. From now on, you can click on the endpoint and start taking actions. The first one will be acquisition, and you also have some other information here, such as the information about the endpoint, like all the previously assigned tasks. And if there are any scheduled tasks, you can also see them here. So clicking the information, you can also attach like tags to the endpoint. Let's first start with the acquisition. Clicking acquire, the only thing you need to decide is what do you want to collect from the endpoint. We already provide some out-of-box acquisition profiles, such as full browsing history, event logs, memory and RAM, like RAM and page file, basically, and a quick acquisition profile. For the demonstration purposes, we'll go over this first one. So this is an acquisition profile we have created for one of our CM playbook actions. And what you need to do is giving it a name. Let me show you the acquisition profile. So in case you need to create a new one, you can easily click this button. So that way we can see what we collect. We have 3 sections here in this acquisition profile. So let's give it a name. In this first section, we have all the system-related artifacts that can be found on any endpoint starting from Windows XP. And this list is like we have in total 64 evidence types. And the list contains all the like installed applications, downloaded files, disk-related evidence, like memory-related evidence, like all the major browser histories. We have NTFS, all the registry artifacts. Another important thing about the evidence collection is we collect both raw evidence and we also parse the collected evidence, so no further processing required. As an example, like event logs are a good example of this. So you have an option to collect EVT and EVTX files, but selecting this option will also parse all the relevant information from those event logs and will provide them in the report. So we have over 60 evidence types here. And you can also collect the application artifacts. If the machine is running some server, as an example, IAS or like MongoDB. You can also collect the logs of these applications, and we have around 60 evidence types here. But that's not all. You can still customize the collection. So just by creating a new custom content profile here, adding a wildcard pattern here, as an example, if you like to collect all the PDF files, you can also attach this to this acquisition profile. So whenever one of your investigators use this acquisition profile, all the evidence you have selected will be collected. That's the same for Linux. So let's go back to our acquisition page. Let's give it a name. And there are a number of options here. By default, AIR has a default policy. Using the policies, you can configure some like the properties of an acquisition. In this case, it will be applied a default policy, but let me switch to the use customs option so we can see what type of options are available here. So the first one is you can choose the evidence repository. In this case, we'll be collecting evidence into the local machine, but you can also choose a remote evidence repository. In this case, it will be an SFTP server. And as mentioned earlier, we're also adding support for cloud evidence repositories. So in the upcoming version, you'll also have an opportunity to save the evidence into the cloud directly. And even though AIR is extremely lightweight, when you have, especially in large enterprises, there may be some compliance requirements. So you can also limit the CPU usage in case it's required by your enterprise. And for compression, it's enabled by default, but you can also provide an encryption password. That way, all the evidence will be encrypted with that password. Let's click Start. An important fact about assigning tasks to the endpoint, task assignment is in real time. So all the endpoints are connected to the AIR console in real time. So whenever you assign a task, the task is immediately sent to the endpoint. And as you see here, the endpoint, so it's not a polling mechanism. Endpoints are already connected to the management console. This becomes especially important when you integrate AIR with your CM or SOAR products, because when these products create an alert, then you have a chance to immediately assign a task to the endpoint in a completely automated way. And that way, when you want to investigate the endpoint, even that alert was generated 3 a.m. in the morning, you still have all the acquisition report. So as you see, it's it will be finished in a minute. Let's click on a previously acquired one. Once you have the acquisition, clicking that view button takes you to the case report. This case report is a report that we've been working on for the last 3.5 years. So it's extremely well organized, and it contains almost everything you may require when it comes to investigating an endpoint. So it starts with the system information. We have all the processes here. And clicking on individual processes takes you to the details page. In this page, you can see all other information about the process, like the TCP connections, UDP connections. And if there's a match, we'll be talking about the triage in a second. You also see all the matching rules here. And we have auto runs, scheduled tasks, like startup folder services, all the downloaded files, where they were downloaded from. And we do our best to make it as easy as possible. When you have this report, like 99% of the time, you won't be required to do any further parsing of the evidence. And there are some quick links here. So if the file is on VirusTotal, you can, one click, get the result from VirusTotal. So basically, whatever we need is already included here. And another good thing about this report is you can easily run some searches inside this report. And as you see, we have some matches in the listed sections. And clicking on them quickly highlights the matching ones. And this report is self-contained. So when you download it as an HTML file, you won't be required to share anything else with the third party. So if you want to share this report with another colleague of yours, you can just download the HTML and share it, and they'll see the exact same collection report you see now. And you can also generate a PDF out of it. And for PDF generation, we even support individual column selection. So that's the acquisition part, and the previous one is already completed. Let's go back to our slides and talk about the second one. Using AIR, you can also run a triage on either a single endpoint or a number of endpoints. Using YARA rules, you can easily sweep all your environment. And we also have a YARA rule validator. So that case, it doesn't let you do any mistakes. So before running the task on the endpoints, you also have an opportunity to validate the rule. You can do this on a multiple endpoints. And in the upcoming version, we are also combining this feature with auto actions. So basically, auto actions are, you'll be able to provide some actions based on a playbook. That way, whenever you have a match in one of your endpoints, all the actions provided in that playbook will be automatically applied to that endpoint. As an example, if you have a match in a web shell file, you'll be able to automatically delete that file. Or if there's a match in one of the processes, you'll be able to dump the process and collect all the information about that process. I mean, this features are, you can perform basically any action, including automatically isolating the endpoint. So those will be ready soon. And using the timeline AIR feature, you can create a timeline of an endpoint or a number of endpoints with just one click. And when you start with one endpoint, you can also enrich this timeline by adding multiple endpoints anytime. The good thing about timeline is it's collaborative, so multiple investigators can work on the same timeline, and you can enrich the timeline with milestones. And in the upcoming version that will release at the end of this month, we are adding support for enriching the timeline with CSV files. So basically, you'll be able to import any CSV as long as they have a timestamp column in them. So you'll be able to use your firewall logs or some cloud storage logs. So any type of like CSV that has a timestamp column will be usable in the timeline feature. Let's go back to console and start a timeline on one of our endpoints. So let's first go with the triage. So for triage feature, we have a button here. When you click triage, you see all the previously created YARA rules. Let's go back to triage page and create a new one. Clicking this new rule, you give it a name, malware domain search, as an example. You have three options here. You can either search the rule in both memory and file system, or you can individually scan memory and the file system. So clicking memory, we have some examples here, and we'll be searching for a malware domain, and you can just basically replace it and see what are the processes that have this string in their memory. And even though I'm not sure if it's visible now because there's an overlay here, but we have a validate rule button here. But it doesn't matter because when you save this rule, the rule is automatically validated and saved. So going back to the endpoints page, clicking back again to demo PC, and now you can start the action. There's another feature that really helps when it comes to running triage. If you want to limit the scope of a triage to, let's say, 10 endpoints, what you can do is you can quickly add a tag to this endpoint. Let's say incident 3, and then we have a new tag here. And when you click on that tag, you only see that endpoint. So you can add multiple endpoints into this tag, and then perform all the actions we have covered by clicking this like 3-dot button here. So let's run a triage. Select the rule. You can select multiple rules, by the way. And still, just like in the acquisition case, you can configure the CPU usage if it's required by your like compliance. So let's assign a task name. And sending it, just like the case with all the other task assignments, it's in real time. So all the endpoints are pushed this information, and they immediately start processing the task. And once it completes, as you see, a basic process scan takes around like half a minute. Clicking on this view will provide you with the same report that contains only the memory scan of that endpoint. So as you see, we have a process that contains that string. And we'll be like adding support for the auto actions. And when it comes to timelines, let's wait for this to complete. So clicking this timeline button, you can either create a new timeline or you can add this endpoint into an already existing timeline. Let's create a new one now and give it a name. A random name. And then selecting multiple endpoints from here will immediately assign a timeline creation task to the endpoint. And in just 5 minutes, the secret here is we are collecting only the relevant information. By saying relevant, as an example, over 170 event log records are collected, all the timestamp of the processes. So whatever has a timestamp that can prove useful in an incident response case or in an enterprise forensics investigation is immediately collected. And once the timeline creation finishes, you'll be presented with a similar timeline. Let's open this one. So as mentioned in the beginning, it's collaborative, and you may notice that it's an unusual looking time here. The reason you see it when you have a scheduled task on the endpoint that is not executed, by default, that's what Windows shows. So in case of a timestamp attempt, we are showing whatever is visible on the endpoint. And by clicking on this timeline, you can easily time travel to that specific moment. And then you can also add some milestones here, or you can add flags. So by selecting one of these flags, you can quickly create a flag. And these flags are immediately visible to the other investigators. And even though we didn't mention, AIR supports roles and privileges. So whoever has access to timelining features, they will be able to log into Management Console and join the investigation with the other investigators. And if you want to add a new endpoint into this timeline for enriching it, you can quickly click this endpoint button here, and you can select other endpoints. And once you select it, a task will immediately be assigned to the endpoint, and all the timestamped events collected will be merged into this timeline. In the upcoming version, we are also adding support for CSV files. So basically, you'll be able to select a CSV file and then provide some mapping because, we designed it in a really generic way. So as long as you have a timestamp column, the only thing it will ask you is provide us with the timestamp column and maybe the format of the timestamp. And here you can also add milestones. Milestones are basically short notes for investigators to create some notes for themselves. So by basically adding a timestamp milestone here, let's say milestone 1, you'll be able to enrich the case further. And when you click flagged events, all the milestones added will be visible here in a chronological order. So that way it becomes really easy when it comes to the reporting phase, which is also one of the most time-consuming tasks of incident response and enterprise forensics. And that's the timeline. We already talked about some features of AIR. Let's go back to the slides and talk about the integration and automation. The great thing about AIR is it supports out-of-box major CM products. As an example, we have out-of-box support for Splunk and QRadar, but that's not the only CM products we support. It comes with a generic integration feature. So as long as the CM product or an EDR product or a SOAR product, as long as they have a webhook support, you can, in just 5 minutes, integrate AIR with any product on the market. This way, you can automatically trigger tasks. So whenever these products create an alert, our product will be immediately arriving to the crime scene, taking the highest resolution pictures of the crime scene, and then in the upcoming version, you'll be able to also perform some actions based on the playbooks. So this makes it 24/7 instant response, and we have much more integrations on the way in the upcoming period. So let's go back to AIR and click to the triggers page and create a new trigger. In this case, we'll be naming it as Playbook Scenario 3. One thing to note here is we're not interested into the nature of the alert. So you can integrate it with any webhook source. And as an example, in QRadar, these are called offenses. So you write some rules, and whenever that rule is triggered by an endpoint, an offense is created. But AIR does not, AIR is not interested into these, the nitty-gritty details of the offense. What you do here is you just select the parser as QRadar. You can also select the other CMs here, or you can select the generic URL read endpoint name parser. That way, as long as you provide the endpoint name from here, maybe using a script, you can quickly integrate there. Let's go back to Curator. And whenever this trigger is called by the CM product, we select an acquisition profile here. And one of the drawbacks of like CMs is they can generate concurrent alerts for the same endpoint. By using the ignore feature, you can ask AIR to ignore multiple execution, like recurrent execution, for the same endpoint in 2 hours, 4 hours, or in a day. When you save this, AIR provides you with a URL. Copying this URL and pasting it into your CM product is all you need to do. And by the way, all the tasks we have started are completing one by one. So all you need to do is like copying this URL and pasting it into the CM product, and then the integration will be completed. That's all about AIR. The reason we have described AIR today is because we are super excited about our new product, and AIR will be the best way of launching drones in a completely remote manner. So let's start with the drone. Drone is actually a number of things. First, it's an evidence collector. So you can collect over 120 different evidence types. It comes embedded with our IREC engine. It's also a forensic analyzer, so you can ask it to analyze an already collected evidence. Another cool feature about AIR is it comes with an embedded Sigma scanner. So all the publicly available Sigma rules, and there's a huge effort going on in GitHub. You can scan a live machine using the Sigma scanner. It also comes embedded with a YAR scanner. You can run it on a live endpoint, or you can use it as a post-processing engine. It also supports command line execution. Today we'll be covering them like both. And it also contains a scriptable engine, which will be like open to public soon. So you'll be able to add some scripts. And like overall, it's a standalone assessment solution. It's extremely like fast, and it's really easy to use, as we'll be demonstrating in a moment. And it's all delivered on demand. You can also remotely deploy it across a number of endpoints. Let's talk more about deployment. As is the case with all our products, AIR is a zero config deployment product, and it's a standalone executable, so you're not required to install anything on the endpoint. It doesn't have any dependencies, so it's a self-contained file. You can deploy it directly from AIR console as a manual task, or you can also schedule a drone deployment for your critical assets. So that way you can automatically deploy drones whenever you have an alert from your CM or SOAR products. You can also deploy it using SCCM, thanks to the zero config deployment. And you can also manually execute on the endpoint. That's what we will do in a moment. And you can also drag and drop existing evidence into the executable for immediately scanning and analyzing the provided evidence. It also comes with a beautifully designed tower UI. It's like a control tower. And the great thing about tower is it streams the evidence right into your desktop over a WebSocket. Basically, what drone does is it turns an endpoint into an investigation session that can be connected by multiple investigators. And thanks to the upcoming feature, Interact Shell, so this version that we'll be seeing, we will demonstrate soon, is streaming the findings into your browser. But in the upcoming version, you'll also be able to interact with the endpoint by providing some cross-platform shell functions that are specifically designed for enterprise forensics and incident response. So we call it, it's like a VR for the investigators. Let's talk about the analysis targets. You can ask it to scan a live endpoint, or you can run it on a group of endpoints. You can provide a case directory, which is acquired by Binalyze AIR or IREC. In the upcoming version, we'll also add support for EBTX files. And you can also ask drone to analyze any CSV or JSON file. Before we talk about findings, let's talk about some numbers. When it comes to malware, this information is based on the latest A/B test statistics. So as of the latest statistics, we have every month we have 1 billion malware in the wild, and that's why AIR is designed not to detect malware, It's actually a modular architecture. So it's composed of modular analysis pipelines. This way, it can acquire evidence, or you can provide an already existing evidence to that. Once the evidence is provided to drone, it first passes a generic pipeline, and once the generic pipeline processing is completed, depending on the evidence type, it's passed through an individual pipeline that is designed for that specific evidence. And at the end of this process, it may sound a bit long, but it just finishes in just like 3 to 5 minutes. And once the analysis completes, you'll be provided with findings. The reason we call them findings is because drone works with two labels, let's say. So every finding may either have a verdict or a score. In the verdict section, a finding may be dangerous, or if you're searching for some keywords or some other rule, they'll be highlighted as matched, or they can be suspicious. Even though it may not be a detection, even the rare items are also highlighted by drone. As an example, if the machine has a network share attached to it, like mapped to it, this is not a detection itself, but it still provides useful for investigating an endpoint. So these type of evidence are marked relevant, and on the right side, it also scores the evidence. Because when the evidence passes from those individual analysis pipelines, each step in that pipeline may either increase the score of the evidence or decrease the score of the evidence, and at the end of the pipeline, you'll have either high, low, or medium evidence. Let's first start with the first use case, and then we'll be talking about the other use cases. So today, we'll first make a rapid compromise assessment on a live endpoint. And this use case will first collect evidence from the endpoint, and then we'll be providing some keywords for drone to search on all the evidence areas. One thing to note about this rapid keyword search is, even though there are a number of solutions on the market that can search for evidence, like OSQuery or Yara, the great thing about keyword search in AIR, you're not required to know any information about the type of the evidence. So the only thing you'll need to do is you just provide some keyword, and that keyword will be searched in all the properties of every single evidence. At the end of the acquisition and analysis, you'll be provided with an enriched acquisition report with all the labeled findings. So let's go back to our Windows machine. So drone is a standalone executable, as you see here. Running it will start in console mode now, and then we'll automatically start the tower UI. And by default, it starts in autopilot mode. This way, you're not required to do anything. But in this use case, we'll be asking some searches. So let's disable MFT analyzer, which may take an additional 3 or 4 minutes. So let's provide some keywords here. Let's provide some phishing.com. So this can be a URL, this can be a file name. Let's say we just received a report from our cyber threat intelligence provider stating that one of our documents, let's say leaked document, is being sold on dark web. So you can provide this. You can provide some process name, or you can provide an IP address. And all this information will be searched in all the areas listed below. Starting the mission, AIR will immediately start an acquisition job. And there are a number of things happening in parallel now. So as you see on the left side, it's collecting evidence. And while collecting evidence, you still see some findings here. And the reason for that is we have a number of device scanners here. As an example, we have a generic web shell scanner, and we have an events of interest scanner. This is basically sweeping all the relevant event logs and highlighting the information you should be looking at when you need to. And once the investigation completes, we will have a full report. So while it runs, let's go back to our slides and talk about the other use cases. We already have some dangerous, high, or suspicious ones, but we'll get back to that in a second. So the second use case, as we have already seen in the report, AIR, you can use AIR for quickly running an application analysis on the endpoint. it will show you, it will highlight all the recently installed applications. And again, just like is the case for all the other sections in the evidence, you can search all the installed applications by keywords, and by default, it will automatically highlight all the suspicious and relevant ones. As an example, it will highlight all the hacker tools. If there are any anti-forensic utilities that left traces on the endpoint, they will be also immediately highlighted. Even though these are not detections or findings, we still highlight some important applications that may provide access to other systems in your environment. As an example, if the machine is running some enterprise management solution that may be used for lateral movement, these are also highlighted. And we also show you the encryption tools and some cryptocurrency related evidence. The third use case, it highlights all the events of interest. And this is made possible by the public Sigma rules. So it scans all the event records using publicly available Sigma rules and quickly highlights all the information in those event logs. And as a side note, all the keywords you provide is run on the full event log details. So, basically, whatever you provide as a keyword will be searched on the event logs as a full text search. And it will also come with a new feature that will be announced soon. We'll be automatically pushing Sigma rule updates from drone.binalyze.com. So this way you won't be required to pull update, like get an update for Sigma rules, because they will be delivered to your environment immediately. As the fourth use case, drone scans for web shells. By scanning web shells, it's not only scanning your system with YARA rules. It can scan your system with YARA rules, but it also finds the outlier web resources. By saying outlier, if there's a web resource that was created in an unusual time frame compared to the other ones, they will be highlighted as well. And it will also highlight high entropy files in the web server directories, so that way you can be notified about the important or relevant or rare items. And as the last one, running a keyword search on the endpoint will provide you with the capability of searching all the browsing history, even if it's deleted, which would be the case in some like incident response investigations. You still have a lot of other evidence that may contain the evidence. That's what we'll see in a moment. So you can run a search on a master file table, all the processes, shellbacks. As mentioned previously, you can run it on full event details and all the other evidence. So let's go back to our investigation. It's already completed. So in just 3 minutes, we have all the findings here. Let's click them one by one. So in the dangerous verdict, we have an attempt to exploit a non-vulnerability, and this was extracted from event log from using our live event log scanner. And we have a web server artifact that is a known web shell. So these have a verdict of dangerous, which is what we should be looking at for sure. And we were searching for some keywords. As an example, we got a hit in browsing history. And in the suspicious section, we also have some high entropy web resource, like com.dll. And we also have some other suspicious events, which states that the event log service was stopped. And in the high, we have an outlier file. And as an example, we have prefetched information here. And there are some files that does not have any digital signature, and they're all executed just once. And the reason this evidence got a high score is because of all these 3 finding details. And we have some low and medium here as an example. So we have a network share here that may contain sensitive files. If it has any active connections, then it will be marked as a medium level finding. Clicking on the report will immediately take you to the acquisition report. And the difference between AIR and IRIC reports is this report comes with all the findings embedded into it. So in this section, we see all the information about findings. And as you see, they're grouped here. And clicking on individual sections, you'll be able to see all the findings, and hovering over them will also show you the individual items in that finding. As an example, we have like a file here that doesn't have a digital signature. The name contains, it looks random, and it happened in a real, like we call it super relevant time. So it means it happened in the last few weeks. And all the other sections are, again, marked with the appropriate findings. And these files are in the acquisition. We also have some 4 findings here. And let's go back to our slides. Before we get back to the upcoming features, let me go back to our VM and show you other ways of executing drone on an endpoint or on a case file. So drone supports command line execution. What you can do is you can quickly spawn a command line and typing drone here with an age option will show you all the parameters. So basically, you can select the mode, either auto or manual. The default is auto. And you can ask it not to run a tower UI, so that way all the information will be outputted to the command line. So this makes it possible to run drone using some other third-party tool, and that's what we'll do now. And you can also provide information about syslog. So all the findings will be sent immediately to the syslog. So that way you can run drone and see all the findings in your CM or any other syslog monitoring solution. So let's provide -n so it doesn't run in tower mode. And let's write the name of it. So running it will immediately output the findings into the command line. And this is a previously made acquisition. So this directory was created when we double-click and run drone. But now we have an already acquired evidence, so we can provide it. And all the information you see here, as well as being sent to the console, is also saved into both HTML files and JSON files. So in case if you want to provide this JSON file that contains all the findings to some solution, you can also provide that information to those products. And once the investigation completes, all the information will be saved into the directories. Now let's do another way of running it. So dragging and dropping it into drone will immediately start tower. In this case, we already have an acquisition that is created by some other solution, including Binalyze AIR and IREC. So this way, when you click Start Mission, we will only analyze the evidence without collecting evidence from the endpoint, because we already have an acquisition. So this way, it's running on an already acquired evidence. And as you see, in the blink of an eye, you'll see all the findings, like anti-forensic software, some processes that strange orphan processes, some network shares that are rare to see, and all the information you have seen previously will be immediately highlighted. And it's almost done. In just 15 to 20 seconds, this will be also completed. So today will be, tomorrow we'll be announcing releasing the first version of drone. And we already started working on the new features. The most exciting one is when you have a case file that contains a well-structured JSON file, 99% of the time, you're not required to do any full disk acquisition anymore, except some cases, in case you need to take it to the court. When you have a JSON file, just like the case with Binalyze AIR and IREC, the comparison is much easier because you're already looking at a well-structured data. So this way, forensic snapshots, CSV files, and JSON files can be quickly compared to another forensic snapshot, CSV and JSON file. So in the upcoming version, we'll be adding support for diffing an acquisition against the golden image. This way, you'll be decreasing the noise and see what has been added, removed, or modified on that acquisition based on the golden image. And based on internal tests, it provided 200 times less evidence to investigate, which literally decreases the investigation time to just a few seconds. We hope you enjoyed it. That's all about drone. I'm now passing the ball to Steve.
Thanks, Emre. That was really interesting. I hope everybody else found it interesting as well. Before I get into the next steps, if you have any questions, please type them now. I seem to be getting a lot of encouraging emojis, which is great. But if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. So next steps. Let's go through what they are. So if you've seen anything today that you think requires a one-to-one conversation, then the best way to do that is to go to binalyze.com and go to the book a demo page. That will allow you to select a time slot for us to have a chat. So if that's appropriate, please go ahead and do so. As Emre mentioned, the beta program for drone will be launching in the morning. So if you'd like to take part in that process, again, please go to binalyze.com/drone, fill in the quick form, and we know who to talk to tomorrow. If you'd like to arrange a POC, if you're sold, please write to sales@binalyze.com and we can kick that process off for you. And also, we are in the process of building out our channel partnerships across the world. So if you are a reseller or you're an MSSP, please get in touch. We are looking for partners in all major markets. And so let's deal with the questions. Let's see what we've got. Shukru, well done, Binalyze team. Congratulations. Thank you, Shukru. Shukru is one of our board advisors, so he's okay. Hakan, how SOC teams can use Binalyze in their operations? Emre, do you want to handle that?
Sure. Actually, Binalyze is designed to be, in the first place, designed to be used by security operations centers. So they can use it for remotely acquiring evidence. They can use it for responding to like incident response investigations. And thanks to our latest product, they can also use it to extremely speed up their process of investigation and endpoint. And they can do this all in remote fashion. So it's created for them. So they can use it in almost every aspect of their incident response process.
Absolutely. And as I just mentioned, we are looking for MSSP partners who are running outsourced SOCs as well. So if that describes your business, please get in touch. Another question, is it possible to attach custom YARA rules to a mission, to a drone mission?
Exactly. Actually, what we have done in the demonstration, we have provided the mission using the Tower UI, but mission files can be provided in any format. You can ask drone to pull them from some web server. You can provide mission files as a zip file. So what you do is you just combine drone.exe and with a mission file. So that way you can send it to your customers. Especially this will be the case for MSSPs. So you can provide a mission by a number of methods, and providing it as a file is one of them.
Great. And are there any plans to support OS query?
That's one of the items in our roadmap. So just like YARA and Sigma, in the upcoming versions, we'll be adding support for OS query. So that way, drone works it also works in headless mode. So you don't need to run it from some management console, because what it does is it turns the endpoint into an investigation session. So that way, it already comes with an embedded web server. Combining this with OS query, you'll be able to attach some rules to the drone as a mission file, and then run it and get all the findings into some. It can be a syslog, or it can be some other product you'd like to feed that information into.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a question from Ben. Hi, Ben. He's in the UK, I believe. Does the registry acquisition feature capture the entire registry, or does it parse selected keys and artifacts? And if it does, can you customize what specifically is captured?
Great. The registry acquisition works, it works with the kernel mode driver. So what we do is we collect all the Hive files, and including the old ones. So because when you upgrade a Windows machine, a folder named Windows old is created on the endpoint, and it may also contain a lot of information, useful information. So we collect the raw evidence files and parse it using an offline registry parser. So that way it doesn't depend on system calls, which may be problematic. And we also parse the evidence. So what you have is you already have the Hive files, and you also have everything extracted from them. So the answer is yes, and we do a bit more than that. And can you customize what's specifically captured? It's a good question as well. I mean, registry acquisition is really fast in Binalyze AIR and IREC, and in Drone now. So that's why we didn't add any selective option there, because when you click registry acquisition, all the Hive files are collected. But we may add some customization here, depending on the number of feature requests we receive.
Great. Okay. Mason says, well done. Thank you, Mason. You know that means a lot coming from you. That's very
Hi, Mason.
nice.
Thanks a lot. All the feature requests.
And he also has a question, but part of the question is turned into an emoji, so you might need to retype it. When will all 3 products be capable of collecting master file table from drives other than the smiley face or OS drive? Mason, what's the smiley face?
No,
the C drive or OS drive.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Actually, we were quite busy implementing all the features like Mason and his team was asking. So in the upcoming versions, we'll be working on it. It's a priority now. So it will be on the way.
Okay. And a question from Charla. Can we run drone on offline disk images like other forensic software?
Great question. So actually, we are trying to stay away from E01 and L01 because we take it as the traditional way of doing stuff. But as long as you have a method of mounting that into your workstation, there are a number of ways to do this. So after you mount the image in your workstation, you can still use Drone as a post-processor. But if you're asking about if we'll be supporting evidence extraction from E01 and L01, we won't be supporting it natively. But it doesn't mean that you cannot use Drone for investigating evidence that is collected as an E01 file. You can still map it and use Drone for analyzing the evidence.
Okay, thanks, Charla. Question here, do you support Mac OS? We hear that a lot.
Before that, Steve, we also have another one, the golden image part. So actually, golden image comparison is a long-time dream of our team. I remember talking about it almost 5 years ago, because when you have a ground truth, it becomes really easy to see what has changed or what has added or removed from that image. Previously, it was not possible because even when you compare a byte stream, if they're in the right place, then it may be a bit easy. But if you have a lot of modifications, then it becomes really hard. In our case, we are not comparing a byte stream. We already have a well-structured JSON file that is acquired by an endpoint. And if you collect evidence from golden image or provide the golden image that was collected in the past, you'll be able to quickly take out all the evidence that needs to be there. And that way you'll be able to focus on what has changed, modified, added, or removed. So that's how it will work. And it's really exciting because it really decreases the investigation time to minutes.
Wonderful. Nicely sidestepping the Mac question as well, so I'll ask it again. Do you support Mac OS?
Actually, Mac was not a priority because we are completely focused on enterprise forensics. We love Mac. We're also developing the products in Mac, so it will be supported by the end of this year. And actually, we have taken a step forward for this. With the latest releases of AIR, we have added support for Linux boxes, and our endpoint agent is cross-platform, so we'll just put more effort into Mac soon, and we'll do our best to finish it by the end of this year.
Wonderful, good news. And a question from Ikut. How can we prove the evidence collected by drone in legal terms? I guess he means.
Yeah, that's a vague point, because when it comes to traditional forensics, what you need to do is you take a full disk image and you get a hash of that image. Most of the time, you need to have like separate copies of that image. One is handed over to the suspect, and the other one is taken to the department. But in modern incident response, I mean, this is true for law enforcement. So if you want to take the investigation to court, then you need this. But 99% of the time, we are not even interested into like talking about that investigation the other day. So our solutions are helping our customers to immediately, in the least amount of time possible, understand what may have gone wrong on the endpoint, and it's actually a problem that does not have a solution now, because when it comes to volatile evidence can change at any time. So it's not like the dead box forensics. In dead box forensics, you just turn off the machine, and as long as you preserve the hardware, whatever you have in the hardware will still be there. But that's not the case in RAM or the volatile evidence. So for this, for addressing this need, we have added timestamping. That way, when you acquire evidence with IREC, you also have a timestamp of the evidence, so you can prove that that specific evidence existed at that specific time. But this is not for the court. This is just for proving the timestamp of the evidence.
We do have some interesting developments, which we'll be announcing probably next month in this area in terms of the chain of custody in terms of the evidence. So watch this space on that. There'll be some exciting news in that area. Another question from Mason. Frequently in ransomware incidents, we end up having to mount a VMDK, that's the OS drive of the affected machine, to another device, and then pointing our collection tool at the drive letter to collect from it. Will we get the capability to designate a drive letter as the OS disk?
If Mason asks it, by the way, for those who are who doesn't know who Mason is I mean, they're working. I think they're handling almost like more than 1,500 cases a year in US. So that's why they're getting these high quality questions. It's not a priority right now, but we can consider adding this. I like the idea of mounting a VMDK and then collecting evidence from it, as long as we know the password. So it can be considered, but it wouldn't be right to provide a like ETA for that.
Okay. That wraps up.
Mason.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. And everybody else that's asked their questions as well. That wraps up all the questions, I think. So thank you, everyone, for your time. We're just slightly over the hour. Hopefully you found the content interesting. If you'd like to get your hands on the product, please go to binalyze.com/drone, and we will be distributing that tomorrow. And we hope to speak to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone.